put another way, of handling pace, handling power when our opponents just slap it at us. Why do I think that's so important? Because you could be a pickleball player who's played for 10 years, and you could be a drilling court person 5 days a week, right? 5 days a week you're out working on your digs. But you can play against someone who's played for a week and a half, which comes from tennis, ping pong, racquetball, and they're going to know pretty quickly how to hit a hard, low shot. Some might have that shot easier than others. And if you don't know how to handle that and punch that back and redirect it and keep them out of position, it's going to be very easy for them to make you feel pressure, even if you have a lot more experience. So with the punch volley, this is kind of roped up in the category of understanding how to handle pace when it comes at us, right? A lot of people have a misconception when we're dealing with a drive, dealing with the ball where we're attacked. A lot of people will say, oh, you just block it back. They hit it hard, you go soft. That's a little bit of an oversimplification. If someone's driving a ball at the baseline at me, I'm up here, and I just block it back. We worked on our block ball yesterday. If I just block that back, where does a block usually land? Shorter, right? So if I'm blocking it shorter, what am I allowing my opponents to do?
Come up.
So I'm not saying it's always the wrong shot. Sometimes out of desperation, it might be my only available shot. But if I'm being driven at, and all I know how to do is slow down the pace of that shot, I'm inviting my opponents forward, and I'm losing my positional advantage. The superior shot, in my opinion, when they're driving at me, I'm still going to contact in close to the same spot, but just pushing through, just a little bit, adding just a little bit of force, uses their power, but redirects it, keeps them back, right? So I don't want to give up my positional advantage as the returner, as the team that gets up here first. I want to own this advantage for as long as possible. When I'm dealing with power, it's not enough just to put my paddle on the ball and block it and let them in. I want to punch and try to keep it back. So, two common scenarios where we're going to punch rather than block. We just described one. We hit the return. Our opponents, rather than hit a third shot drop, hit a third shot drive. We want to use their power, push it back, redirect that, keep them back where it's harder for them to hurt us. The other scenario is, let's say the point is neutral. We're up at the kitchen line. We're dinking. But I see my opponent kind of telegraph their speed up. I see the ball. I'm expecting it. If I'm able to contact that out in front, punching that back, like we talked about yesterday, will always send a bigger message to our opponents about being scared to attack us. If I block back, I might play a perfect block, but a block does what? It brings the point back to what? Neutral. A counter punch can potentially win us the point, right? So if we see it coming, or if we have a positional advantage, we would be better off punching than blocking, okay? So now we're gonna talk about the technique on the punch. I like to break down kind of forehand side first, then we'll talk about the backhand side, guys. Bring out anything that I leave out here. So, talking on the forehand side, common tendencies on that punch are we have such a big range of motion going back on the forehand that we don't on the backhand. One of the biggest issues we have when we're attacked here is bringing the paddle back and taking a big swing, right? When I do this, I am generating power. I don't want to do that when I have a drive coming at me, because they already provided the power. I don't need to generate more, and if I reach back and try to add extra, I'm going to miss a very high percentage because my contact point will suffer, okay? So rather than reach back and go forward, I'm going to do what we call open the book. My paddle's already out here. A lot of times we're going to talk about being shaded a little bit on the backhand side so we can cover more territory, especially in the continental grip. But if I'm in my continental grip, rather than pull back to generate, I already have the paddle out in front. So the first thing I'm going to do is what we call open the book. What I turn is my wrist. I open here. Now my paddle's already where it needs to be to make the volley and have that contact point out in front. So this is where I want to turn. So my common tendencies are bringing it back too far. The other common tendency is watch what happens if the first thing I do is not turn my wrist, but I turn my core. Where's the paddle going? I still open the face, but now I'm twisting, and I'm going to be slower to go twist forward versus here out in front. Okay? So I don't want to twist the core. I don't want to bring my paddle back. My paddle should always stay in my peripheral vision. So there it's good. there I've lost it. I don't need to take it back that far. It always stays in my vision, contact point out front. And then when you're making contact with this forehand volley, you want to think of it like you're just giving someone a high five. You're here, here. You're pushing from the shoulder, and when you give a high five, you're going to leave the hands high. You don't hit and drift back here, right? We want to punch and keep the hands high more often than not. It's pickleball. This ball comes back. We want to keep the hands up, ready to hit 1, 2, 3 ball. It's not hit and have it come down, which I've seen a lot of us have the habit. We lay one, and then the paddle comes right back down. Keep the hands high after contact. Last thing on the forehand side, try your best to not take the lazy route with the angle of the paddle. So if I'm up in good position and they hit a low shot, the easiest thing to do is just drop the paddle. But if I do that and I hit the ball, what's more often going to happen when I make contact? Yeah, it's going to be a very high pop-up for an easy slam. So I want to train my body to be here. See how the tilt of the paddle is above, horizontal, above my wrist? As I get lower, I want to maintain that paddle position and use my body and my legs rather than do this. I'm only going to do this in complete desperation. I want to be willing to do the work with my lower body and maintain this paddle tilt. A little bit above horizontal is ideal, but if you drop it below horizontal, bad things are going to happen more often than not. Okay, switching the backhand side. Backhand volley, different common tendencies. Like I mentioned before, we don't have that same range of motion. So we don't have that temptation to take it back too far. So for the most part, our contact point's pretty good staying out in front of our body. The bigger issue though is the face of our paddle. I use a continental grip when I'm up here. Okay? Most of us do. Some of us are going to be in Eastern, which is even a more extreme issue that I'm going to talk about here. The face of the paddle, when I naturally bring that into my body, where is it angled? This is what feels comfortable. It's angled over. See that? That's just where it naturally goes. So if I go to punch a ball, take a ball. If I go to just punch a ball and push forward like I talked about, but I keep my face open, that ball's going to come up. I'd love to punch it deep, but even more important than punching deep, I want to keep this ball on my punch volley relatively low to the net so my opponents can't easily attack me. So right before I make contact, I don't switch my grip. If I do that, and it comes to the other side, then I'm in a tough spot. I'll keep the same grip, but I'm going to roll my knuckles forward. Roll forward. Then when I punch, I've got a nice flat face. That's going to equal to a nice leveled shot on this side. And then the last tendency that I've seen, a little bit more at the beginner level, but I think we can all benefit from this, is a lot of times we'll take this backhand volley, and rather than punch forward, we'll swing across our body, okay? And we'll kind of pull this to the side, okay? So to me, if I was giving everyone a tennis lesson, I would tell you as a righty here to take your right leg, use the shoulder, but close your stance and engage that shoulder to punch from. Well, how do we simulate the same thing in pickleball? We can't take that step. So we need to, as we're rolling, engage the shoulder and push forward. Now when I engage this, now my follow through stays here. When I keep my shoulder back, that's when I have a tendency to pull that ball across. So I'm going to engage as I'm rolling my knuckles, and that's going to help me punch in a straight line, not across my body. Okay? Gentlemen, anything else on the punch volley that you guys think about before we have a show?
The big thing for me is keeping my wrist and head square together. A lot of times some amateurs will lose one in front of the other, and as soon as this head comes around too soon, we start missing on angles. This shot is supposed to be very effective punching down in the feet of your opponent, and you have the most energy on the ball as long as your hand and your head stay square through. Anytime that we lose one or the other too soon, we start missing on angles. We want this shot to be very square and very punchy. Similarly, we don't want to be too far out front because we lose that energy, right? It's almost like we're punching someone, and we want to punch. I'm going to use the camera, I'm going to get close. We don't want to be too far out because we lose the energy of this knockout punch. I want to be closer and keep it in here where I can hit the ball and strike it harder.
Yeah, then you come down to elbow. Think about your elbow, right? If the elbow is too far out, we start here. We have nowhere to go to add any strength. We want to have more bend in our elbow. So when we contact, we have somewhere to go and add just a little bit. Again, we focus so much on shoulder and paddle position and pushing here. We're pushing with our legs too, right? It's not just our shoulder. We're adding that force with our legs. If we don't and it's just the shoulder, this is going to come off pretty weak more often than not.